Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like first to thank the Jacob family for hosting this event today, and also for the University of Zurich, and more specifically of Professor Gartner for hosting this event tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, I'm a little bit emotional about this because this is probably one of the most interesting speech I would have done so far in my career. The subject is extremely interesting, and I'm very delighted to be here with you tonight. It's a great honor for me to be here tonight. I'd like to acknowledge, again, the people in this room. I've said the Jacob family, Professor Gartner, but I would not forget our Minister of Education, Ms. Candia Camara, and our ambassador, our Minister of Education, who came with me tonight to that important event. I realize that I'm the one standing between the dinner and now, so I'm going to try to be as much as possible interesting in what I'm saying. Try not to bore you. If I start to see you texting, I would realize I have to speed up in my speech. You know? So I'll try to do my best, really, to tell you what I think is a speech that I wrote personally, and it comes from my heart. The subject is of great interest to me. So, as I said, it's a real honor for me to be here with you tonight, and this for a few reasons. First, I think to be associated to such an important event organized by the Jacob Foundation is a real pleasure when one knows the strong positive impact this foundation has in the world, and more specifically, in Africa. Therefore, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Board of Directors of the Jacob Foundation for selecting me as a keynote speaker for this award ceremony. Second, I'm very proud to participate in an event that fosters research in education in general, and more specifically, in early child development, commonly called ECD. This field of research is vital for the future, for our future, and for my continent, Africa. It can make a huge difference. As said Maria Montessori, the most, and I quote, the most important period in one's life is not one at college, but the first one. The one that runs from birth till the age of 6. The third reason why I'm honored to be here today is that it's a great pleasure for me to be able to be in such a wonderful assembly in this room. So let me thank also all of you for joining us tonight. We're here today gathered to celebrate Professor Orazio Attanasio, head of the Department of Economics at University College London, UCL, and research director at the Institute for Fiscal Study, and ICSSP in Kenya for their skillful parenting program in East Africa, aimed at improving early childhood development, parenting, and agricultural practices in rural areas. Both are receiving the Jacobs Foundation's 2016 award for their research and involvement in early child development. And it is thanks to people like Professor Orazio Attanasio that we are seeing breakthrough findings in the field of education, and more specifically, in better preparing the future generation to enter the job market and contribute more efficiently to the sustainable development of our planet. Please join me in applauding Professor Orazio Attanasio. A growing body of research from low-income and middle-income countries show that parenting programs can be effective in reducing level of violence against children and promoting optimal child development in low resources settings. ICSSP combines evidence-based parenting program with agribusiness in rural parts of East Africa. By successfully applying research findings to real-life situations, ICSSP not only makes a difference on the ground, it sets the example to be followed to provide a better living and learning environment to our children. Please join me in applauding ICSSP, represented here by Beatrice Ogutu, Director of ICSSP Nairobi, Kenya. Ladies and gentlemen, I must admit that when I accepted the Jacobs Foundation's invitations, I did not realize how much work it will require from me. Indeed, while I'm quite interested in the subject of education, it is now clear to me that I was way underinformed. So I'd like to further thank the Jacobs Foundation for educating me. Ladies and gentlemen, why is the subject that gathers all of us here today important? I think to respond to that question, it is necessary in my view, to better understand the consequences of lack of ECD. We can safely say that it is demonstrated that early childhood experiences have a critical impact on brain's development. Thus, learning capacity, health conditions, and ultimately, earning potentials are impacted by what occurs during our childhood. Neuroscience research shows that 80% of the cerebral volume is constituted by the age of 3, and more than 90% by the age of 6. Ladies and gentlemen, this means that one's future is therefore almost sealed by the age of 6. Anything that prevents the proper development of the child's brain between the age of 0 to 6 will have an impact on him for the rest of his life. Therefore, investing in physical, cognitive, linguistic, and social-emotional development is critical and cannot be underestimated. Without overloading you with numbers, let's keep in mind some key figures that provide you with an overview of ECD context among regions. It is estimated that each year, 250 million children are unable to achieve their full potential development due to poverty, malnutrition, and lack of appropriate care and early stimulation. Around 160 million of children under the age of 5 are stunted due to chronic malnutrition. Only 50% of children between the age of 3 to 6 have access to pre-primary education. For Africa, only 20% of children can access these critical learning opportunities. Across developing countries, less than half of the children under 5 have access to 3 or more books at home. It is estimated that around 57 million children in Africa are stunted, evidencing widespread chronic malnutrition. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, Africa is the only region where stunting has increased between 1990 and 2014 due to both slower reduction and high fertility rates. It is estimated, finally, that 1% of GNP is the minimum public investment required to ensure provision of quality for ECD services. In OECD countries, it is indeed estimated that ECD spending amounts to around 2.36% of GNP. While comparable data is not readily available across low-income countries and middle-income countries, it is, however, estimated that governments in these countries spend only between 0.1% to 0.2% of GNP on preschool education. As you can see, this is way below the minimum needed. For a long time, the focus in relation to child education was on access to primary educations, including in industrialized countries. And it was assumed that pre-primary education was the sole responsibility of parents. In the meantime, our society did evolve. Indeed, with more and more urbanization, with more parents working, we entered in a new type of society where children from age of 0 to 5 spend less and less time with their parents. It is thanks to recent research results on ECD that awareness on the necessity of investment and attention needed to be provided to children between 0 to 5 years were taken to a different level. In rich countries, more information was provided to parents on ECDs, more resources were allocated to ECDs, and the role and growth of kindergarten schools allowed to fill the gap in child's education in families where both parents are working. In poor country, however, the situation is quite different. Without naming the country, but if we take a country in Africa, I'd like to give you the following numbers to give you a feel of the situation. Only 5% of children aged 6 months to 23 months benefit from a minimum acceptable diet. High rate of under 5 mortality, 108 deaths per 1,000 live birth, a reduction of only 14% since 2005. High prevalence of stunting, 30%. Low access to preschool, only 8% nationally, which reduces to 2.3% in rural areas. Very limited social protection measure, no social safety net system in place, poor access to safe drinking water and sanitation services. More generally, and per the Brookings Institute, and I quote, 40% of Africa's children will reach primary school age, having had their education opportunity blighted by hunger. Some 2/3 of the region's preschool children suffer from anemia, another source of reduced learning achievement, end of quote. To make things worse, in Africa, parental illiteracy affects the capacity of children to acquire early reading, language, and numeracy skills critical to ensure an efficient and smooth transition to primary school. In addition, illiterate parents face strong difficulty in supporting their children with their homework. Let me quote here Kevin Watkins, and the quotes, "The ultimate aim of any education system is to equip children with numeracy, literacy, and wider skills that they need to realize their potential, and that their country needs to generate jobs, innovations, and economic growth." From South Korea to Singapore and China, economic success has been built on the foundation of learning achievement. And far too many Africa's children are not learning, even if they are in school. Over the past 15 years, Africa has shown strong economic growth, highly carried by good commodity prices. For Africa to continue on this path, it would have to generate more value added from the commodity it exports, and this could only be achieved with well-educated people. We know now that this is only possible if proper care and education is provided to African children between the age of 0 to 6. Most low-income countries are facing huge challenge when it comes to resource allocations. Indeed, most of these countries are facing natural catastrophes, generate limited internal resources, and rely a lot on foreign aid and support over which they don't have good control. So how do you manage priority in such an environment? For example, how do you manage budget allocations between the needs for youth, adults, and retired people? All of them don't have an aligned interest. Indeed, youth, they need to be taken care of. They need attention from adults, proper food, good education, and proper health care. They, however, don't generate economic growth and rely on their parents. Adults are the ones we rely on to generate growth and take care of youth and support the retired needs to the older class of our society. Finally, retirees feel that, and rightly so, that they have contributed to the community and it's now time for them to enjoy a quiet life. That leaves government with limited resources having to make tough decisions on budget allocations. And when considering this, one must remember that youth do not vote. If youth could vote, wouldn't they support higher allocation of resources toward their educations? We probably will never have the answer to this question. While government's role is to plan, government officials want to be re-elected. This translates frequently into a lot of pressure to resolve first immediate problems to the detriment of long-term solutions. A food crisis has an immediate impact, and it generates a lot of media attention, and thus generally gets international support very quickly. An education crisis is more vicious. It doesn't have immediate effect, but has a more disastrous impact in the future than any food crisis. As a result, there is a lower sense of urgency to tackle the roots of the problem. Africa must react promptly. As Professor Orazio Tanasio's study demonstrated, if Africa doesn't want to see the gap with the developed world widening, it must address the challenge of early child development as well as reform its education system. ECD will require better information to parents, better pre-primary school infrastructure, and better nutrition for kids. Reforming education will ensure that children will be better prepared to enter the job market. Ladies and gentlemen, talking about informations and taking my own example, I do not consider myself uneducated. Yet I've learned a lot by doing research on this subject in preparing this event today. I therefore believe that educating parents and students is critical and vital for the future. By teaching the value of early education, we will bring awareness to another level. This should be achieved through specific programs at school for the kids and especially for teenagers. For adults in rural areas, it is more complicated. Radio programs, campaigns would certainly contribute to educate parents. All these actions could be done at reasonable cost. Institutions at the UNICEF of the African Union should come with regional advertising campaign that will strengthen the level of information on this subject. In this area of educating people on ECDs, the private sector could make a huge difference in partnership with philanthropic foundations such as the Jacob Foundation and NGOs. Indeed, companies working in rural areas could leverage their interaction with farmers and uneducated parents through existing platforms such as Farmers Cooperative to educate them in relation to ECD. I think ICSSP in Kenya is doing exactly this, and it works. We should replicate this initiative, and I hope that this prize and the publicity it will generate should help to achieve this. It is also clear that in Africa, we do have to invest more in social infrastructure, both in healthcare and education, improve the quality of service delivery, and increase the value for money. Providing access to more pre-primary education centers, both in rural and urban regions, would make a huge difference. In addition, ensuring proper access to healthcare to a broader range of the population is critical. While we can expect African governments to increase their budget allocations towards social infrastructure, it is clear that aid and the international community must be more engaged and play a bigger role. Per the Brookings Institute, and I quote, "The development assistance level of education in Africa has stagnated in recent years. The 1.8 billion provided in 2010 was less than 1/4 of what is required to close the region's financial gap," end of quote. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to reverse this trend. Ladies and gentlemen, let me take this opportunity to talk about Côte d'Ivoire. Côte d'Ivoire is not spared by the education crisis. Our government, with our Minister of Education here present, works with the international community to address issues we're facing in health and education. In the case of Côte d'Ivoire specifically, my country, in 2013, we joined the worldwide movement Scaling Up Nutrition, SUN. On July 16, 2014, the National Nutrition Council was created by presidential decree. As a result, the government launched in May 2016 a national plan of nutrition, which we hope will mobilize $470 million, of which 70 million will come from Côte d'Ivoire. This program promotes exclusive breastfeeding for children under the age of 6 months, support mothers in the transition of children from breastfeeding to solid food. Finally, this program promotes the consumption of nutrition supplements for children between the age of 6 months to 5 years, as well as the medical follow-up in medical center for children under the age of 5. In 2015, President Alassane Ouattara made the school in Côte d'Ivoire mandatory from the age of 5 to 16. To achieve this, the government decided to substantially increase the education budget as more classes and more teachers were necessary to implement this plan. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a major step towards a better educated population and a more literate portion of our population. Ladies and gentlemen, Africa's challenges are daunting. And it is thanks to institutions such as the Jacobs Foundation and ICSSP in Kenya that we are making progress on our goal to a better world for all. I would therefore like, one more time before concluding my remarks, to thank the Jacobs Foundation that deserve, I believe, a big round of applause for everything they're doing in the world and specifically in Africa. Thank you very much. In my conclusion, I will cite a proverb from Niger. And I was really unable to translate it into English. So for those who don't speak French, I encourage you to take your headset, because I'll say it in French. I think it resonates better in French. Nous sommes coupables de nombreuses erreurs et de quantité de fautes. Mais notre crime le plus abominable, c'est d'abandonner les enfants, de négliger la source même de la vie. Nombre de choses dont nous avons besoin peuvent attendre, mais pas les enfants. C'est maintenant que ses os se forment, que son sang se crée et que ses sens se développent. Nous ne pouvons pas leur répondre demain, car tous les enfants s'appellent aujourd'hui. End of quote. Children, African children, should have the right to proper health care, nutrition, and not only to an education, but also to a proper education, so that they can expect a better tomorrow. Therefore, in my view, it is the responsibility of parents, leaders, and the international community to be the voice of our children and to best defend their interests. Our children should expect no less. Thank you very much.